This video will show you what needs to be in a lab report and what your lab report should look like as you write this. In most of the lab reports, you're going to have four sections: the purpose, the procedure, data and results, and then the conclusion. On occasion, depending upon the lab, you might also have a hypothesis. So we'll look at that specifically in each lab. I'm just going to skip over that part now. When you look at a purpose, it should be pretty short, it should be pretty concise, it should explain what you're doing in the experiment, but also it should give you a little bit of background information. So I have two labs here. One is a poor example and one's a good example. So you can see this one right here. The purpose of this lab was to determine the moment of inertia of a rotating body. All right, that's what was happening in the lab, but you can see that's the lesser of the examples. If you look at this one right here, we see the same exact first sentence, but then the rest of this down here is just extra information, and that's what's getting into this part, providing accurate information and explaining some theory that goes with it. You're still going to see it's not going to get much longer than this, just a few sentences, but give a little bit of background information about what's happening, not just one sentence of what's going on. When you do the procedure, everything you're doing here, it's going to be in the third person, so don't use I or we or me or anything like that. And what you're basically doing is explaining in as much detail as you can exactly what happened. When you do this, don't use just like steps of exactly what you did. So don't say I walked over to a scale and I put something on scale and so on. But explain what happened with the materials that you used. Okay, and also you can see it says there should be a graphic. So again, when you look at this, you can see there's a graphic here with these details. This one's a little more step-by-step of exactly what happened in order. But what you want is more of, if you go through and read this information, what you're seeing is it's telling you everything that happened, but it's not saying you have to do this, then this, then this, then this, as you go through it. But that's just explaining everything that's going on. You see a picture of the apparatus there. One thing that you want to include that both of these are missing though is a list of the materials. So you want to put a bullet point of the materials that are there. Right? After reading that procedure, somebody should be able to recreate what you did with the experiment. It might not be exactly the same, like you might not have to pull it back 35 centimeters just like you did or something like that, but they have the general idea and they can recreate the experiment. When you do the data and results, as you go through this with the data and results, mainly what you're going to see here are data tables, graphs, and calculations. So what you see here, and this is the poorer example, you see a bunch of graphs, data table graphs all together, just everything crammed in there with a really little explanation of what's going on. So it's really hard to follow the information that's here. Meanwhile, if we look at the better one, what you'll see is there's some information here, there's a drawing or whatever it is, an explanation. Some calculations, an explanation. A graph, an explanation. Some calculations, an explanation. So do them one part at a time and explain what's going on with it. Okay. When you do your calculations, you do have two options. All right. Neither of these is acceptable. So you can see this work, especially when it's more calculations that are involved. If you do it by hand and take a picture, as long as it's neat and I can read it, and then just paste that picture into the lab, that's fine. Or you can do it with just typing it out. Either one's fine. For simpler ones, you might just be able to do it like this. When it gets a little more complex, you might want to do it handwritten just to save yourself some time. And it'll probably look a lot neater depending on your writing than a whole bunch of lines going through that work. When you get to the conclusion, basically you're just summing up your results. You're calculating your percent error. You're looking for possible errors. When you're looking for possible errors, the main source of error that you're usually going to have is going to be that there was friction somewhere in the system that we didn't take account for. All right? Or you could have some type of human error somewhere, but do not use the word do not say there was human error. Be really specific of what that error was and why it could not be corrected from you. So for example, if you were doing a timing something with a stopwatch, it's just impossible for somebody to stop it at the exact point when something happens. So that is an example of human error, but be specific and talk about the timing, not necessarily just writing human error. So with the conclusion, again, you're gonna just make sure you summarize everything, and this is gonna vary by lab, and you have to pay attention in the lab of what needs to be in the conclusion. But if there's a diagram that helps, you can put that in, you're an explanation, you might have a percent error, things like that. All right, and you can see that one's a little more in depth, and then we have this one here that's basically about the length of what the purpose should be. So you need to go into a lot more detail explaining what's gonna happen here. So this should help you out as you're going through writing any lab reports. And then other things you want to look for is just, is everything logically set up? So like, for example, when you look at this, you're not going to put data and results at the bottom of a blank page when the data and results start on the next page. Just put it right up here at the top. So just like organizing things, blatantly bad spelling errors and stuff like that, and grammar errors, you can lose some points for those. But mainly what I'm going to be looking at is the content and that it's well explained of what's going on.